Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to read 2 chapters today in Stuart Little, chapter 3 and 4, because the questions will be together. So the first chapter is chapter 3, and it's called Washing Up. Stuart was an early riser. He was almost always the first person up in the morning. He liked the feeling of being the first one stirring. He enjoyed the quiet rooms with the books standing still on the shelves, the pale light coming in through the windows, and the fresh smell of the day. In wintertime, it would be quite dark when he climbed from his bed made out of his cigarette box, and he sometimes shivered with cold as he stood up in his nightgown doing his exercises. Stuart touched his toes 10 times every morning to keep himself in good condition. He had seen his brother George do it, and George had explained that it kept his stomach muscles firm and was a fine abdominal thing to do. After exercising, Stuart would slip on his handsome wool wrapper, tie the cord tightly around his waist, and start for the bathroom. Creeping silently through the long, dark hall, past his mother and father's room, past the hall closet where the carpet sweeper was kept, past George's room, and along by the head of the stairs till he got to the bathroom. Of course, the bathroom would be dark, too, but Stuart's father had thoughtfully tied a long string to the pull chain of the light. The string reached clear to the floor. By grasping up as high as he could and throwing his whole weight on it, Stuart was able to turn on the light. Swinging on the string this way, with his long bathrobe trailing around his ankles, he looked like a little old friar pulling the bell rope in an abbey. And this is a picture of him. To get the wash basin, Stuart had to climb a tiny rope ladder where his father had fixed for him. George had promised to build Stuart a special wash basin, only 1 inch high, and with a little rubber tube through the water which the water would flow. But George was always saying he was going to build something and then forgetting about it. Stuart just went ahead and climbed the rope ladder to the family basin every morning to wash his face and hands and brush his teeth. Mrs. Little had provided him with a doll-sized toothbrush, a doll-sized cake of soap, and a doll-sized washcloth, and a doll's comb, which he used for combing his whiskers. He carried these things in his bathrobe pocket, and when he reached the top of the ladder, he took them out, laid them neatly in a row, and set about his task of turning the water on. For such a small fellow, turning on the water was quite a problem. He had discussed it with his father one day after making several unsuccessful attempts. "I can get up into the faucet all right," he explained, "but I can't seem to turn it on. But I have nothing to brace my feet against." "Yes, I know," said his father. "That's the whole trouble." George, who always listened to conversation whenever he could, and that was his opinion that ought to construct a brace for Stuart. And when he got out some boards, a saw and a hammer and a screwdriver, a broad awl and some nails, and started to make a terrific fuss in the bathroom, building what he thought was going to be a brace for Stuart. But he soon became interested in something else and disappeared, leaving the tools lying around on the bathroom floor. Stuart, after examining this mess, turned to his father again. "Maybe I could pound the faucet with something and turn it that way," he said. Look, what do you think he's going to pound the faucet with? What is he going to pound the faucet with? So Stuart's father provided him with a small, light hammer made of wood, and Stuart found that by swinging it 3 times around his head and letting it come down with a crash against the handle of the faucet, he could start a thin stream of water flowing, enough to brush his teeth in and moisten his washcloth. So every morning after climbing to the basin, he would seize his hammer and pound the faucet, and the other members of the household, dozing in their beds, would hear the bright, sharp bink, bink, bink of Stuart's hammer, like a faraway blacksmith telling them the day had come and that Stuart was trying to brush his teeth. Now I'm going to read chapter 4, which is exercise. I hope everybody's exercising at home. One fine morning in the month of May, when Stuart was 3 years old, he arose early, as was his custom, washed and dressed himself, took his hat and cane, and went downstairs into the living room to see what everyone was doing. Nobody was around but Snowbell, the white cat belonging to Mrs. Little. Snowbell was another early riser, and this morning he was lying on the rug in the middle of the room thinking about the day when he was just a kitten. "Good morning," said Stuart. "Hello," replied Snowball sharply. "You're up early, aren't you?" Stuart looked at his watch. "Yes," he said, "it's only 5 minutes past 6, but I felt good and I thought I'd come down and get a little exercise." "I think you should go get all the exercise you want up there in the bathroom, banging around, waking all the rest of us, trying to get the water started so you can brush your teeth. Your teeth aren't really big enough to brush anyways. Want to see a good set? Look at mine." Snowball opened his mouth and showed 2 rows of gleaming white, sharp as needle teeth. Look at that. That's a mean-looking cat. I don't think he's a very nice cat. "Very nice," said Stuart. "But mine are all right too, even though they're small. As for exercise, I can take all I can get. I bet my stomach muscles are firmer than yours." "I bet they're not," said the cat. Stuart glanced around the room to see how he could prove to Snowball what good stomach muscles he had. He spied the drawn window shade on the east window, with its cord and ring like a trapeze, and it gave him an idea. Climbing to the windowsill, he took off his hat and laid down his cane. "You can't do this," he said, and he ran and jumped into the ring, the way acrobats do in a circus, meaning to pull himself up. See him hanging there? What do you think's going to happen when he's on that window shade?
I don't know.
A surprising thing happened. Stuart had taken such a hard jump that it started the shade. With a loud snap, the shade flew up clear to the window, dragging Stuart along with it and rolling him up inside so he couldn't bulge. "Holy mackerel," said the Snowball, who was almost as surprised as Stuart Little. "I guess that will teach him to show off his muscles." "Help! Let me out!" cried Stuart, who was frightened and bruised inside the rolled-up shade, and he could hardly breathe. But his voice was so weak that nobody heard him. Snowball just chuckled. He was not fond of Stuart, and it didn't bother him at all that Stuart was all wrapped up in the window shade, crying and hurt and unable to get out. Instead of running upstairs and telling Mr. and Mrs. Little about the accident, Snowball did a curious thing. He glanced around to see if anybody was looking. Then he leapt softly to the windowsill, picked up Stuart's hat and cane in his mouth, carried them into the pantry, and laid them down at the entrance of the mouse hole. Doesn't sound like he's being very nice. When Mrs. Little came down and found them there, she gave a shrill scream, "Ah!" which brought everyone on the run. "It happened," she cried. "What has happened?" asked her husband. "Stuart's gone down the mouse hole." Do you think they're going to find Stuart? I hope so. Have a great day. Miss everyone.